My mornings and afternoons are all running together. I think so.
No, I'm good. You ready?
I think we're confirmation that we're on.
You ready, Steve?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here for the August 5th, 2020 Planning Commission. May we call the roll, please?
Chairman Brown?
Here.
Mayor Schneider?
Present.
John Brown?
Here.
John Murphy?
Present.
Janie Sickenzer? Here.
All members present. We'll move on to the agenda. There is no old business. We will start now with the public hearing under new business. This is a public hearing. Nicholas Langenfelter, Vice President of Development with PLK. Preliminary plan approval for the property known as 4590 Beach Street, commonly known as the U.S. Playing Card Company property. It's currently located in a light manufacturing district with a PUD overlay. So this is the first step in the process of approving the future development of U.S. Playing Card. We're at the public hearing stage. At this time, I'd ask that if anybody is going to participate in the public hearing, either for or against, to raise their right hand. Do those that are raising their right hand do solemnly swear that what they are going to say is the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right. We'll start with having Nicholas Langenfelter and whatever team members you would like to invite to the podium to sort of explain the project.
Is he for or against?
I don't know.
I'm going to take this off so you guys can hear me a little better, if that's okay. I've also asked our guys for social distancing. I'll just call them up when we kind of flip to their slides. That way we're all not standing here. So again, my name is Nick Langenfelter. I'm Vice President of Development for PLK Communities. I'm joined by Mark Morrison, who is also Vice President with our organization and helps oversee the construction and manages the construction, demolition, and everything on this project. So any specific questions related to that, Mark will be able to answer. I've also invited Mark Gillespie. Mark is with Viox and Viox. They're our civil engineer on the project. So when we talk to any about any of the specific civil plans, utility routes, things like that, traffic patterns, Mark will be here to help answer those. He'll also answer how we're going to go through the traffic studies and things like that. So, and finally, we have Colleen Reynolds with DSD Advisors. They help on all of our public relations and community engagement. So again, thank you for your time today. I'm going to give us a little more background than we've had before. I know you all have the packet here, but I thought I'd just take one step back and just talk about why we have the plan we have today to help everybody understand that, and also help you understand how we're making decisions as the process continues to go forward. So with your preliminary approval today, and I'll kind of walk through that. I know Carrie mentioned this. I apologize if it didn't have this. We'll have to figure out what we need to do here, but in paragraph 1 on page 2 of your the plan we submitted, the request was to add residential to the PUD. The PUD was from 2014, and the PUD lists a whole bunch of uses that aren't allowed, but it doesn't really tell you what is allowed. Residential was not specifically spelled out. So that was one of the reasons we were requesting to add residential. This is a significant investment on our part. We are a residential developer, and we need to make sure before we go through the next phases of architectural design that we are going to hit residential on the site, and we're not creating a plan that everybody doesn't like. And then also to approve the preliminary PUD. So we fully anticipate, and I'll go through the benchmarks in a little bit, but by mid-August, our goal is to have the architect begin schematic design, and you guys will have full schematic designs, materials list, and plant list for your final PUD. Our target is by November. We're saying the end of the year. Hopefully we have it done sooner. So what we may end up doing in order to keep this project on schedule is we may bring this in building by building, but you will have a materials list and a plant list to overview at that time. I will also say the reason we might bring it in a little bit phased is because some of the buildings will take less time to build. So we want to make sure we're delivering units. We're not delivering all of our units at the same time. And we're delivering a project that ultimately can be successful. We know we can't just deliver all the units at once and then hope they're leasing. That's not going to be very successful. So what I wanted to briefly walk you through, and I did give you guys all a hard copy as well, the presentation, because I know last time it was a little difficult to see some of my slides. So There's 8 organizing principles that we established prior to any design work that happened on this property. And basically, an organizing principle is what are our guides? Every time we want to make a design change, we want to add something, does it meet these 8 principles? And if it doesn't go in our plan. So I wanted to get you to understand how our organization is approaching this design as a whole. So the primary organizing principle, or principle number 1, was to embrace the history as we look to remember. So as you all know, we've added the clock tower. Originally, when we had brought the plan before City Council, we had shown just the clock tower with the 2 main roads down the middle. What we decided is once we started getting the demolition, it made more sense to widen that tower, which now actually makes it wider than the park is. So right now, that new massing is about 65 feet wide, where the park in the middle is at 50. So ultimately, you lose many of those roads. But again, we wanted to make sure as well, when you look down every street, so we have a new street that we're adding in the middle, that you always see the smokestack, the clock tower. No matter which way you're looking in the development, am I seeing a historical element that reminds me of where I'm at? So that's why our number 1 principle is always to remember the history before we do that. So the other thing is this. We also wanted to balance equal parts urban things and natural for best effect. So when you look at this project, you'll see a lot of green space. You'll see the walking trails around the market hall. You'll see the main park in the middle that's a public park with a fire pit and a sound and a stage that we can have presentations on, a public dog park. So we wanted to make sure we weren't just building an urban project. The other thing you'll notice is you really can't see a lot of the parking, and that was intentional. We did not want to create another area that was just a parking lot when you came up on the road. So it is urban, but it's also much more nature-driven in effect. So we wanted active indoor and outdoor spaces as well. So that's why you see the parks. That's why you see the market hall. We wanted people of all ages and all walks of life to feel welcome and have a place somewhere in the development. This is another big one. Create a place, not just a project. This is guiding every decision we are making on our retail side. And what I mean by that is we can fill any tenant if we wanted to, but that is not what we are doing. We are selecting tenants. We're taking very much like a 3CDC model where you see downtown, where we're saying to these tenants, we want you to come here. We'll do this on a percentage rent. We'll offer it to you a little bit lower, but I'm intentionally going after you because I want you in this location. The same thing for the brewery. We want established brands that we know will be successful, that can fill that space and will create a sense of place. Same thing for the market hall. Everything we are doing, how do we create a place and not just a generic project that anybody could have thrown up? We also want to embrace the emerging retail trends. That's number 5. So how do we make sure that these smaller spaces, the market halls, other options like that? You don't see a market hall. Cincinnati has yet to really try to do this. We have Family Market, which is fantastic, but it's very grocery, butcher driven. This is much more food driven. How do we create the next food entrepreneurs? The guy that's number 2 under a major restaurant downtown wants to go somewhere. We want to bring him to Norwood. But how do they do it? They may not be able to get the money right now, so we're trying to create that market hall in smaller spaces. Our typical bay might be 1,100 square feet, where you might see, bigger bay somewhere else, but somebody can't afford to build that out. So we have to figure out how to do it for them and get them to come here. Number 6 was leverage new food concepts in food and hospitality. Again, back to the market hall, the center, the heartbeat of the development. How do we get those ideas? This is Chelsea Market here. I will get into, we do have our market hall operator. We have their contracts executed. Everything is moving forward there. They've done 32 halls across the country, and they're very good at what they do. So finally, we wanted to make sure the whole community feels involved. So, and we talked about this a lot in the last planning commission, but how do we let Norwood feel welcome in the development? How do we make sure there is a public park? There's a place that you can go. There's a dog park. That's why we did the community engagement we did. And finally, the last thing is we have to trust that people are yearning for real places. What does that mean? That gritty, organic feel. They want that industrial feel. They want to know where they're at. They don't want to be in this sterile new environment. So we have to understand going in that we need to show the factory. If we don't show the factory, they could have gone anywhere. So we need to always make sure we're remembering that throughout. So when we make a decision, as I said, like when we figure out who this tenant is or will they fit here, we go through those principles and say, do they fit these? And if they don't, they're not going. So we've been very fortunate because we've received a lot of interest already, and I'll kind of go through some of who those tenants are. But we've been fortunate because people want to be here, and it's allowing us to not just have to take whatever's available. So Now to the main site plan and how we got here. And this has not changed since the last time we've been here, so I won't go too much into depth unless you would like me to. But again, this is the top-down view. So what you see, and we'll go into, and your packet will have phase 1 and show you those buildings. But to the north, you have residential that will be built in a future phase, along with the dog park and detention. We have had some early discussions. I know they're looking at the Public Works building. How do we build a trail system, something else? We are going to do whatever we can to be a part of that because we feel that is so critical to this area. So how do we do something there? And again, I know that's very preliminary, but we would love to find a way to tie all that in. Mr. Mayor, I know you asked about bike lanes before. One of our operators has been very specific about wanting to make sure we have bike lanes to the property. So we're going to have to figure out how all that works. But we want to make sure this is a bikeable, walkable community. You'll see in the middle of that heartbeat, that main public square that has a fire pit in the middle. That came out of the community engagement. A lot of people like to hang around their backyard. Another important thing that we see, and we'll see a little bit when the screen on the wall. So we do have public art on the 2 walls on the inside, and it's anchored by a screen in the middle. What that would allow us to do, which I honestly wish we had right now, is if we wanted to do a movie outside for COVID, your family could go sit on the park and watch a movie. Your family could go watch a baseball game, a football game, something else, and be able to gather in that public space, very much like you see downtown in Fountain Square. So overall, though, site plan has not changed since the last time you've seen it. And the only difference, again, when I show screen 1 and screen 2, is remembering that the parking is below that building in the middle. One other thing we did talk about briefly, and we make sure we'll highlight on again, is how this festival network of traffic works. Mark will be able to highlight this a little more. Our goal is that this becomes a community gathering space, a true square for Norwood to have that everybody can come to. So when we say festival network, what that means is if we have an event on the park, if we have a Christmas tree light, if we have something else, how do we do that? How do we manage the traffic and make sure this works? So our ultimate goal is actually to make a circular pattern around the property. We really don't want them driving through the middle because we want that to be pedestrian friendly. We plan to have that road raised. That road will be on grade with the grass and will actually allow you to walk right into the retail. So again, ultimately, we want people to actually go around the property, and that's our primary cycle. There, from this angle, what you'll notice is actually 4 means of egress from the property. You have the north road that is north of the factory building. You'll have the main road, and all of these roads are 2-way, and they all have parking on both sides. So again, they're wider than the roads that you typically see right now. You have a second, what we call A Street, to the south of the park. When you're driving down or coming down that road, you'll actually see the smokestack, and you'll see all the way through the development. Again, making sure no matter what angle you're at, you're always seeing something historic here. And you'll actually see that we are proposing to widen Kenilworth on our portion of the site, because right now it's a pretty narrow road. So we want to be able to narrow that up and have some additional parking. But again, 2-way access from every single street across the property. What you have in front of you in the proposal, we've shown what we believe to be our proposed phase 1. This is our proposed phase 1 today, and we will be bringing it in for final later on this year. We will not be filing out the other phases, but what we believe to be accurate as of today. You'll notice that we have the parking garage in here, the market hall, the retail in the garage, the retail brewery space on the first floor, your residential living. To the right of you have that, you have what we have is our clubhouse right now. And then we also have some walking trails, water features, and some townhomes. So the townhomes will be for sale townhomes. They likely will be built by a well-known builder in town. We originally planned to build these ourselves, but we had a great response from a couple builders actually calling us wanting to be a part of the project. And we figured out, we just said, let's focus on what we're great at and let them be great at what they're great at. So we are looking at that as well. And then you'll notice down south on Beach in Kenilworth, we are showing on that front building on the street. We want to make sure that this phase in this project always looks complete. So we're building center out. That's another thing we decided to do. We felt like if we started one row or one side, you'd always have some dirt pit or dirt hole you're looking at. And we want to make sure the public is always seeing what looks like a finished project. With that, I'm going to go briefly over, we honestly, these are very high level, very preliminary, what we think the economic impact of this project is going to be. So right now, based on rough calculations, we see about 180 full-time construction jobs on this project. That's based on a 24-month build and phase 1 only. Now please remember we have 2 other phases here as well. So That's just on the phase 1 construction jobs. We believe that our annual apartment payroll, when we're complete, that's with all the phases of the project, would be about $500,000. We have roughly 4 to 5 maintenance people, and you'll have roughly 4 leasing people full-time on the project working here. The market hall, so our market hall operator has estimated the annual sales out of the market hall to be north of $5 million. They said they anticipate 12 to 14 tenants in there, earning about $300,000 to $350,000 a year. The brewery annual sales. So we're hearing basically 2 different numbers. Their preliminary number is $2 to $3 million, but most of the operators I've been talking to say based on the space that we have and the space of the revenue they really think they're going to be, is probably be closer to $4 to $5 million a year in annual sales out of the brewery. Other retail on the site, we anticipate the other retail, and this is based on typical bay sizes, everything else, typical revenues, $2 to $3 million a year. And on the office. So the highway office side there, we are hoping to have engaged our office broker within the next 30 days. I've narrowed it down to 2. And once we get them engaged, we're going to go out there. And we're going to spend the next 12 months really kind of going after the larger tenant if it's available, trying to find them. And if not, given the COVID market we're hearing, it may be more of a streetscape and multiple buildings there. But that land towards the highway is all dedicated to creating jobs and bringing additional revenue to the city. So the main office building you see right now is about 100,000 square feet, and we're anticipating about 167 jobs, about $10 million in annual payroll. The hotel, we're looking at about $3.4 million annually, and if we don't end up building the hotel and just build a second office building in that place, it would basically double the office number. So again, very high level, very preliminary, but this is what we think the economic impact of the project looks like for the near future. Major developments since our last time we've been here. We've hired Revel Group out of Atlanta. Revel, as I mentioned, is a market hall operator, specializes in market halls in the South. They've done everything from Krog Street Market to the commissary for the Atlanta Hawks. So very respectable, very well-known guys. One of their partners used to be the head of global retail for Colliers. So they know what they're doing, and they're top-notch. So they're going to oversee our branding, space planning, and basically management of the retail. We are actively involved in negotiations with 2 well-known local breweries who we cannot disclose now, but I hope to be able to disclose by the end of the year. We will have it down to 1. We want to make sure that their branding, their strategy fits Norwood. It works for the area and it works for our project. And that's really what we're working through right now. Revel was in town recently and met with both of them, and they're really going to help advise us to make sure that it's fitting the right theme for the property. So again, I mentioned we have our office brokers down to 2, and we'll have them selected in the near future. And then once we get the preliminary PD approval, we will have our architects engaged within the next month to begin the full schematic design and everything else. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mark from VOX and VOX, and he'll cover public infrastructure.
Thanks, Nick. Mark Loyeski, Vice President of Ohio Operations with VOX and VOX Engineers. As Nick mentioned, we are the civil engineers on this project. So I want to walk through a couple of slides discussing some of our more detailed roadway and utility and traffic related plans. So the first page that you see here is our street network. So Nick did a nice job discussing how we have multiple access points into this property. What this plan really shows is that we intend for those streets to be publicly dedicated right-of-ways. We want the city of Norwood to feel like this is part of their development with the public parks, the public dog space, public utilities. We want to have public streets through here so that this is really just is incorporated into the rest of the neighborhood, and we feel that it's that's one of the best ways that we can do it. Here's our utility plan. So I took a minute to color each of the different utilities that may come up in questions here. So water main is owned by the city of Norwood. We are intending to extend water main down every public road to create a nice looping system through this development to help provide adequate fire flows, to help provide non-stagnant drinking water to all the folks, and as well to provide adequate pressure just for all of the uses and faucets and bathrooms and etc. that's going to be in this development. Public sewer will be extended down our 2 main trunk roads to serve all of the proposed development, and then storm sewer will collect all of the proposed roadway water and take it to the various detention basins throughout the site. I dropped our proposed plan into a Google Earth aerial to give you guys a better feel of where the streets connect. So as you can see, our main thoroughfare that Nick referred to as the raised road, or the road that's going to have no curb and gutter, comes out directly across from the park. We don't intend that to be, we don't want cars on that one as much as possible. We want that to be the more pedestrian friendly, the pedestrian oriented road. Most of our parking is off of the north and the south roads. We want people to come into the site, access around the site to get to their parking, get out of their car, enjoy the space, go to their retail, go to where they're living. We want to try and force those cars to get away from the main public space as much as possible. And then we've got sort of a zoomed out view, and I wanted to discuss traffic patterns, the need for a traffic impact study with this picture in mind. So you guys are all familiar where the site is. It's got great highway visibility, but when you think about how you get there, there's several different ways that people are going to take to get there. You can come, if you're coming from the south, you may come up Smith and take any of those streets to get over to Beach to get into this development. If you're coming from the Oakley side, you may come down Brotherton across the interstate. If you're coming from the lateral or from Montgomery Road, you have several different options to get into this site. And one of the problems that poses when we're looking at a traffic impact study is we don't necessarily know the habits of the people that are going to be living and working or coming to this place to enjoy retail or the brewery. We don't know their driving habits. We've sat around and we've discussed how we think trip distribution might work at this preliminary stage, and we can't come up with anything that we feel confident that will actually occur. And that's because of the uniqueness of the location of this site. So what we're recommending for a traffic impact study is that we as a team and PLK as a team commits to performing a traffic impact study, but we would like to wait until we have a portion of phase one open so we can really study the habits of the folks that are living here, the folks that are coming here to work, the folks that are coming here to visit any of the shops or the restaurants. Because people will form a habit. They'll determine which way they're driving if they live here and they work elsewhere. They'll determine which way is fastest for them to get to the highway. They'll determine which way is the most convenient for them to get to the highway. It may not be the fastest, but they may swing by a restaurant, Starbucks on their way. So we feel that if we were to do a traffic study now, we could come up with recommendations. We feel that we're going to need a few traffic lights. We're going to need to look at additional stop signs. We may need to look at switching roads to one-way instead of two-way. But those would be infrastructure items that we would have to put in place that may be worthless once people get in here and actually start utilizing the facility. They may determine that the way we predicted that they would go is actually not the fastest way for them and they'll go elsewhere. So what we don't want to do as a development team is we don't want to install traffic lights and other maintenance of traffic items that are going to be publicly dedicated because they most likely won't be right within our development. They'll be out from the development on the existing public streets. We don't want to install that infrastructure that you guys have to maintain and operate for the next 50 years if it's not going to be necessary. So we want to see how folks are reacting, what ways people are taking. We want to see how the traffic is really impacted as people start to utilize this space before we commit to putting in additional stop signs, traffic lights, making any changes to the direction of existing streets, etc. So we've advised PLK to go that route as my traffic engineering department has advised them to go that route because we feel that it's just the best scenario for everybody to make sure that the finished product when this development gets built out is what everybody expects and wants. So if there's questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them at the end or now. Well, I am going to turn it over to Colleen Reynolds to discuss some of the community engagement impacts that we have gone through so far.
Thanks. Hey everybody, nice to see you again. Colleen Reynolds with DSD Advisors. I work with PLK on their community and government affairs. Just wanted to briefly recap for you kind of what we've been up to since we've seen you last. Obviously we've continued to utilize our ever popular Facebook page as a tool to communicate with residents and friends of the project, supporters of the project, to inform them of, when we're going to be in front of you guys, our plan, any updates to the project, though there hasn't been much to share. We did hold virtual office hours, which was the first time we did this for any constituent or resident in the neighborhood who wanted to meet with us, wanted to really dive into the project or had a concern or a question, a comment about any portion of the full development. So we did that. We had a smaller attendance than we thought, but found that folks were grateful for the opportunity. So we will continue to do that. Found it to be effective. We used Zoom, of course, for virtual social distancing, but we hope to continue this as we move forward with every phase of the development. And then for the civic engagement side, so I know some of you are aware of this, but we were a little concerned about moving the project forward and bringing it to you guys without speaking with some of the experts in your administration and police and fire and water to kind of, get their candid feedback truly. What do you think about the site plan? Any red flags? To, where are we going to put fire hydrants? How are things going to flow together? So we're really pleased with this, and thanks to the mayor's office for attending and folks in your administration who kind of give us some good, candid, helpful feedback as we move forward. So we had that last week, really helped our engineers and our construction team kind of know how to move forward. We will continue to do that as well. And any department that we didn't get to meet with, we'll continue to do that. And then lastly, keeping your colleagues on council informed of what's going on as well, since we're, going to be moving forward with public finance and additional portions of the project. We want to make sure that they were included. And you can read this in your packet. I won't read it aloud to you, but I wanted to share just a letter of support that a resident sent to us individually, a resident of Norwood who really just emphasized the why behind this project. We would not be where we are today without your constituents. They have been truly wonderful, responsive, creative, and engaging with us on Facebook and via surveys, office hours, and so on. So we're just really grateful, and I just wanted to add in that we're thankful for their participation and their willingness to engage with us. As we design this, we really want it to be a project for and with Norwood, not just something that we believe is the best thing to move forward. So back to me.
Thanks, Colleen. Real quick, I'll just show you the renderings again. I know everybody's seen them before. They're in the back of your packet, so I won't take too much time. But this is the main view coming down Park. You can see the original clock tower, the larger massing that we had originally envisioned, but how we kind of get in there and get into the public space. This is the angle looking from the market hall back in, looking at the public park, the walking trails. To the right of the parking garage, you can see a little what we call the family park. So we have an actual park for families while they're having dinner or doing something else. They can go let their children go play. Very similar to the feedback we received from the community and the engagement surveys. So, and then finally, a look from the public park, what it would look like looking up at the big screen on the side of the original factory building, as well as some of the public art on the ends. So that's not what the public art will look like, but we fully anticipate with what we call the two public art pieces, we're going to have a community group. We've had a lot of people from the community reach out and want to be a part of it. So our thought process was to create some type of board with local members and council members as well, whoever we kind of feel fit, or you feel fit as well. And we'll make sure that those things are really a great addition to the development. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions. I know we've probably gone a little longer than we originally anticipated. So.
Thank you. Does any members of the Planning Commission want to ask questions of the applicant now, or would we like to open it up to anybody who has newly arrived? I don't know if it would like to address the board on the part of the public hearing, or do we want to hold questions when we actually discuss the application in our regular meeting? I'll leave it up to the board. Any suggestions?
I'd rather hear the people who are for it and against it, and then during our discussion we can discuss those points.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Don't stick around, Nick.
Stay right here. Okay. I figured they wanted to see it.
All right. At this time, I ask if there is anybody other than the applicant who would like to speak for the project to come forward. Is there anyone that would like to speak for the project? All right, we'll move on to anybody who would like to speak against the project to come forward. Anyone who would like to speak against the project? Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
Motion by John Brown, second by the mayor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, now we are at the regular Planning Commission meeting for August 5th, 2020. Before us is the preliminary plan approval for the U.S. Playing Card Company. I will leave it to the board who would like to go first to ask questions of the applicant or to express any of their views or opinion with respect to this preliminary plan. I will note that this is the preliminary plan. The next step will be the final plan approval. As the applicant mentioned, that will involve more detailed drawings, materials. They mentioned a phasing aspect of it. I think I'd like to explore that with them when we get a chance, as well as a possible amendment to the PUD ordinance to allow for the residential uses. But we're here today primarily on the PUD application.
I have one question on the gentleman from, I guess he's from Vioxx, about the public roadway plan. I understand the various ingress and egress points. Where would, since they would be coming early in the morning, like delivery trucks, things like that, Rumpke or whoever's doing the haul, where would they be coming in?
So, it's our understanding that trucks are not allowed on Park Avenue. So the only access to the site would be to beach, or through beach, for trucks into the site. And we have several different delivery areas. So for the retail space or the restaurant space, we've got a back-of-house delivery area over in this area. And then for the retail, we've got sort of a back-of-house loading zone over here. We'll also have some loading zones. Some of these on-street spaces will be dedicated as loading zones during certain hours, sort of typically as you would see in an urban area. So maybe from 6 to 8 a.m. or pick the hour that the retailer needs. Those will be dedicated to the loading zones.
Okay, so obviously when Playing Card was up and running and various other companies, Kenworth was used a lot.
Right.
Because it was wider than Park. And there's going to be a lot more traffic on Kenworth. Now I understand it's going to be widened,
We're going to widen it to
or it'll be widened on your area.
correct. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
okay.
so it's currently about 20 feet wide, which doesn't meet most public regulations and doesn't meet what Norwood likes to see as a standard. So we will widen it to accommodate two-way traffic.
Are we talking the right streets here? Kenworth or Beach?
You was asking about Kenworth.
You're planning to widen Kenworth Avenue?
Just on our side.
Just on our side of the roadway.
In
So if you look
Just
the
on
develop,
your
east
side.
east of Beach.
Kenworth
As you
actually
come in.
extends in between Dynagraphics and the Playing Card. That is Kenworth Avenue, but it wasn't traveled much by the public. So from Beach, east.
Okay, but what you were talking, what I'm interested in is the residential part of Kenilworth where every truck is going to go down, which they did when the Playing Card Company
Right.
was there.
And
That's one of my notes, John, and I thought you were heading that direction, but you're talking on your development, it'll be wider.
Correct.
I'm talking about where all the community members that live right now, it is wider, sort of at the Doral Field part.
Well, that's why the trucks made their turn, delivering or not delivering off of, say, Forest Avenue,
Yeah.
because they couldn't make the turn on Park. What I'm saying is, are we going to try to run them down Kenilworth or Robertson? I mean, either way, we're gonna get some complaints, I think.
They're gonna have to go down Kenilworth.
Yeah.
Because Robertson's even less, I mean, it's narrow, even narrower than Kenilworth.
Yeah.
And then even the intersection at Forest and Kenilworth is not a very wide, it's not a very well-regulated, good intersection for running all this extra traffic through.
Right.
And that's 3 blocks away, 2 blocks away from where you guys.
I was just talking about delivery trucks, early in the morning.
Yeah,
Rumpke or whoever, things like that.
I was wondering about the impact on the neighbors. They aren't used to the traffic, and you had said that, and I understand your reasoning for waiting until it's up and running to see what the needs are. But I also think that maybe there should be a little bit of a plan ahead of time, because the neighbors it's going to impact their streets, their lives, their driveways. I think it'd be great if we could be ahead of it and say, okay, so this is kind of the plan, and we could tweak plans as becomes necessary. But is there a way to create a flow so that people who are living there are able to, I don't know. I feel like there should be a plan in place, some sort of a plan in place that we could tweak as needed.
I think one of the things that we could do as we come in with our final is we can do a trip generation analysis to help you guys understand the total volume of traffic. So we, with the number of units that are going to be built and the number of square footage of retail and restaurant that are going to be built, that has a projected trip generation, so total number of vehicle trips that are going to be produced. I think we can bring that to you guys as part of our final PUD to help you understand the total volume of traffic, and we can look at the average daily traffic that's existing sort of in this area. There isn't going to be good counts on these residential streets because as you get out towards some of the larger streets, there will be good ADT. And I think that might help ease some of the concerns. As you see that this is going to be a phased approach, you know, we're going to ramp up relatively slowly. Some of these buildings are going to come online sooner than others. As Nick mentioned, some of them have quicker construction timelines just because they're a more simple building. They're not as large. They're not as complex to construct. So we're going to really phase the amount of residents that come into this development. And I think if we can present that to you, that might help ease some of the concerns on the total amount of traffic that's going to be generated. And we can also look at the way that we feel trucks are going to access the site. We can do a detailed sort of turning movement analysis when we come in with the final.
Well, I think what I'm looking for is something earlier than when you come back, because not only, when you talk about phase, great, but when your phase starts with construction traffic coming down Kenilworth and all the trucks and everything bringing materials and supplies in to even start building it. So we need to be ahead of this more than what I think you guys are sort of proposing. I think we need to have some of those numbers prior to some of this stuff so we can really figure that out. One of the other concerns I have is even at Robertson and Beach, which was a signalized intersection for years, that's at Angelo's. Just in the last few years, it was changed to a four-way stop because the signal wasn't really necessary with the amount of traffic. Traffic study would say you don't need it there. We're going to need that there. You know, clearly we're going to have a lot of cars coming in from the Oakley side, from Cincinnati, and coming across the highway and coming to that intersection. Four-way stop's not going to work there. So that's something we need to look at ahead of time. Even before this construction starts, we need to look at what kind of signalization needs to happen there. The intersection I was talking about at Kenilworth is we've had problems there. So this is where the Little Red Shack is. We've had problems there with cars trying to make it across the intersection, but cars coming down Forest, and then there's parking on both sides. We've doubled up the stop signs and did things to try to help people understand. But that's going to be a heavily used intersection in the near future, and we need something, I think, prior to what we're going. So that's where, Mark, I'm asking for information from you guys on like what we can do to prepare to really lessen the impact. I'm already getting calls about traffic and what we're doing and how so we need to be ahead of it. And you guys have been ahead of everything so far. You know, let's continue that route.
Yeah, real quick, sir. Sorry. We're not trying to avoid it. We were just trying to not create infrastructure we have to maintain. We were willing to we had thrown out recently to escrow money or something that, like, listen, we're willing to pay for the study, but we have two issues right now. One, COVID traffic counts are down. So really, are we even getting an accurate count right now? Make sure we ran into us another project. We're like, well, that's not what the traffic is. We'll go out there right now. There's nobody driving. So what our concern was, what do we even get that's accurate right now? Because we really can't go back and we can't have people out there. So our concern was, how do we get something, you're absolutely right. We can figure out the number of trips. We can figure out but our ultimate thing is, where are they coming from? Because there is so many routes they could come from. And we agree one needs to be done, because if it's not done right, people aren't going to rent from us, and then that's going to hurt. They're going to want to leave, get out of their leases, everything else. So we understand that the traffic study is important and we want it done right. What we were saying is, if the routes are different, then all of a sudden we've installed, a new light at Robertson and we needed to have it, at Forest. Or, honestly, we could need 2 or 3. We don't know. We know that they're needed. We just didn't want to create an infrastructure and all of a sudden the city had to pay for it to maintain afterwards.
Okay.
That's what our concern was.
Okay, I understand that. I'm saying, let's get ahead of this thing.
Okay.
The other questions I have, and I'm sorry, may I continue? I got one more, is when we're talking about traffic within the site and on the site, I had a concern with it not, we really don't have, the streets lining up. Park is not really lining up with the entrance, but then you guys are saying that street coming in from Park Avenue is really what you'd like to be more of a pedestrian, walkable, less traffic. That's understandable. Where are the parking garage entrances on, so my first question would be, if that's Park, if we can say that's Park continued onto your property,
Yep.
are there parking garage entrances off of that?
No, parking garage entrances are here. We're actually routing, you can see the cursor up here. These are your ramps in and out of the parking garage. So we have to actually create exterior ramps.
I cannot see the cursor.
I'm
You're
sorry,
saying on
so-
the top
So the top right.
Upper
you see
left.
This white thing?
top left part of that
The
is
top
where,
left part, that's actually the
Turn it
ramps.
off.
So
Okay.
we're actually routing traffic there because we don't want traffic down that main road as much as possible, and we're trying to force traffic to that outer loop. So that's actually to the north of that garage, sir. You can actually see that's the speed ramps, what they call them as they go up.
okay.
Mr. Mayor, I think basically what it is, it's almost like it is now. If you would come over Park Avenue and turn left, and you can go around the building, I believe that's basically about the same thing.
Exactly.
And to go back to the issue of, we don't know where people are gonna be coming from, I think us who live in Norwood are pretty familiar about how we typically go to get to that site. And I can tell you right off, it's going to be Kenilworth more so than Park because it's wider. It's going to be Robertson coming from Oakley.
Correct.
And it's going to be coming down, as I come off the lateral, I am most likely going to be going down Forest to Kenilworth or Park.
So, correct. The only thing that we'd have so we've actually talked about that. Does a light need to go back to Robertson and Beach? We looked at this.
Already looked at it.
The concern is, I don't think we can have one at Kenilworth and Beach and Robertson and Beach because they're too close. I think there's like a minimum distances.
No.
So, I mean, potentially we could, but for traffic lights to go in there, I mean, stop signs might make sense, but again, I don't think we can have a light at both
But I think
locations.
that the traffic issues associated with going down Kenilworth are not necessarily going to be where it's meeting Beach. It's going to be further back because the intersection at Kenilworth and Forest,
The four-way back there.
it's, I don't think it's a four-way. Isn't that a two-way? Isn't there a weird two-way?
It's two-way, yeah.
I know the stop you're talking about.
Yeah.
It is two-way.
It's two-way.
There are 4 stop signs, but
Yes.
they're stacked on top to make it visible, so,
So, yes,
Kenilworth stop.
yeah.
Kenilworth stops, Forest doesn't.
Right.
That, I've been guilty of almost getting into an accident at Kenilworth and Forest because of that. That intersection is going to be more impacted by the traffic than the intersection coming up on Kenilworth and Beach, because somebody coming up at Kenilworth and Beach, they tend to slow down as they get closer to the project because they're gearing themselves up to parking. Where so as they're coming in off the freeway, coming down Forest, that's going to be, I can tell you don't need to do a study to say that might be an intersection to look at.
And I know Forest and Park needs to be addressed somehow, and I don't know what that looks like, because I mean, that's tough to cross over and you gotta stop again, and we know something has to be done there.
So might I suggest, in terms of, to alleviate the concern, we're gonna escrow funds from the development team to get the traffic study done. By the time we come in for final, we have about, 6 weeks of demo left. The final is really when we'll start pulling our permits for the first phase. We can commit to the, specific traffic counts, and then we could either establish a committee or come in with a presentation separate earlier prior to the final vote with, here are all the infrastructure options we have. And you guys can highlight for us what you think are going to be those areas. That'll help our team to move forward. The only thing that we can't do is just to recommend what the traffic study is going to say, which is exactly what infrastructure to put where. So we can do trip counts. We can try to put together, the different various, the menu of solutions, if you will, for infrastructure, and then work through that with the phase approach. Because I think we're all saying the same thing. Like we don't want to put infrastructure in the wrong place because we might have differing opinions about where we're going to come from. But you guys, need to inform us, and then we can inform you from the engineering side of what's going to happen inside of this site that's going to affect the outside, and you guys can tell us vice versa. So we will absolutely commit to the funds, we'll absolutely commit to it. We do want to be ahead of it. I think we just don't know, unlike some other developments that we normally do, and not in time of COVID, we just don't know what infrastructure to put there, which I think is.
Are you doing traffic counts, or are you able to do traffic modeling? Because the counts are going to be different because you have a vacant project that's going to produce. Is it traffic modeling or is it traffic counts of what's there now?
So you have to do both when you're looking at the traffic. So you have to figure out what's there existing, and then you take the uses, the total density of use in each type of use that's in this development, and you forecast a trip generation and a time that those uses leave the site. So office use obviously has a large peak coming in the morning, where residential use has a large peak leaving in the morning. So we forecast how those trips that are produced by this development, mingled with the existing trips that exist in this area today, what impacts those will have at different build-out levels. So we look at the build year, so when the phases are complete, that's called build, and then we look at 10-year build, so 10 years after this is open. There's a factor of traffic growth that we project and figure out what that looks like on the surrounding intersections as well. So it takes into account both the projected model as well as the existing trips.
And do you also take into account ways of steps that you can take to reduce the traffic, i.e. bicycling infrastructure will reduce automobile traffic? The way that it's designed now, it's very walkable. So if I live along Kenworth on a day like today, I'm not going to be driving down to the site. I'm most likely going to walk. We have ride sharing now, the Ubers, the lifts. Those will impact traffic because it's a different, there's ways that we can do to sort of craft this to sort of reduce the traffic.
So the first way we look at it is assuming that it's just a standard car-centric type development. We look at those impacts, and if we feel that we're on the verge of needing an improvement, or if there's ways we can reduce the amount of traffic to avoid that improvement, then we would look into those options. But we need to assume worst case scenario. That's what the law requires us to look at. Is the ITE, the International Transportation Engineering Manual, gives us trips that these uses will generate. That's what we have to start our model with, and then we can put in different parameters to tweak it from there to see how those different parameters impact the traffic flow.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, for those of us that have been here some time, and for our residents that haven't, I would like, just for the record, those were two large factories that went at times 2 shifts. Many, many more employees work there, say at Multicolor, than work there now because of automation. Have you looked at what was in the past versus what you think will happen now? And if you do, I think what you're going to find is, except for the light there at Kenilworth and Beach, that's about the only thing that's changed. They had 2 shifts, trucks, multiple trucks coming and going from both factories, and employees 24 hours a day, well, 2 shifts at least. So I don't think what you're going to be doing is going to hold a candle to what that neighborhood saw for many, 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 many years. So, but doing the study will let us know these things, but I think if you look back how many employees they had, what their truck rates were, which was a lot, that it's going to be a lot quieter and a lot prettier than what was there.
The unique thing about factory work too is it's shift work.
Correct.
An office building is less shift work than factory. You don't have a 7:30 to 3 shift. With the workers these days, people stagger in from 6:30 a.m. till 10:30 a.m.
Correct.
And they don't leave at the same time either. So it is a completely different animal than what you typically see with the factory shift work.
And I think it's going to be a lot less traffic than many people were thinking, but I'm happy you're preparing to look at all that so this board knows that you're doing the study in case, we need the light back that has been down for some time because the traffic after playing card closed, it wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And on the demolition, I know I didn't get many complaints in the safety director's office about the trucks because they went 3 different ways. They weren't all going one way. Somebody, a councilman might have got a complaint, but I don't think we hardly got anything. Couple maybe, which would be normal. Somebody is going to have a concern and bring it up.
And as Nick mentioned, the developer needs to do this study because if I'm a resident here and I rent and all of a sudden I find that it's gridlock and I can't get to or from my house, I'm not re-signing my lease. So the developer really needs to understand the way traffic flows because it's imperative to the success of their project. So I think, we are prepared to look at the way this is impacting the neighborhood just as much as you guys want.
Thank you.
And Chairman, to your point about rideshare, we've really tried to build into this development specific rideshare spots, the bike infrastructure we're looking at, the loop, incentivizing walking to the full district, if you will. I think we're hopeful that this is a place where even if you're just coming to stay for a little while and socialize, you choose to come and carpool and all take an Uber together, or walk or bike or ride a scooter or whatever it is. I think we talked a lot about walkability within the development, but we also thought about that as it relates to connecting to the adjacent neighborhoods and folks who might want to come visit the site can do so, whether or not they're even coming from Watson Way or other local trails. I think we're trying to keep all that in mind, and also realizing too it's going to be a couple years from now before it's fully built out. So what will cars look like at that time?
Hovercraft.
Hovercraft.
Can I jump in? I think John Murphy brings a unique perspective to it, and something that I had not even really thought about is the historical traffic that was there and how much of an impact this new project has compared to what was there. Rodney is in the back, who's with the Norwood Historical Society, and I'm sure he has even information on how many shifts were going on and what loads are. I know there were trucks, as growing up, there were trucks running through that neighborhood all the time. I mean, I delivered papers and that, but I didn't even think about that, John, until you said that, and it makes absolute sense to say, this is what we had. Yes, it sat idle for some years, but we're trying to put a new improvement in, and it's interesting to think of that perspective. Worst case scenario and sort of best case scenario, Mark, when you talk about traffic, a worst case scenario is we have all sorts of traffic problems because we put PLK's new grand tower on the property, 30-floor office, beautiful luxury thing on the highway, but it would be, that's going to be interesting too, because it's very dynamic as you're putting this together to figure out what kind of tower goes in there, what kind of office goes in there, and if it is a hotel, and then traffic flows sort of change depending upon that also. So I think that's really interesting discussion. I know it's not going to be put to rest, because it's going to come up again and again, and even with council, you're going to have some discussion on that stuff. But thanks, everyone. Really, John, that's kudos. That was a great one.
I would like to discuss 2 aspects. One is the retail. You mentioned this emerging retail trend. Can you sort of elaborate on that? What are we anticipating here in terms of the retail uses? And then also, can you touch on, you mentioned now it's proposed as an office building, which is great, but it seems like as the market sort of adapts, you may be looking to have office uses, but in a different format. If you can sort of explain that as well.
So let me start with the emerging retail trends. What we mean by emerging retail trends is looking at things that are happening in other cities, like the food hall. Like, how do we create these incubator spaces that help people start a business or have a low entry level of capital? So that's what we mean by an emerging trend. Historically, if you wanted to start your own restaurant, you go friends and family, raise $1 million or raise whatever you need to do to start that restaurant and build it out. We understand that people don't have that anymore. So how do we, look at the Chelsea markets, look at the Krog streets in the south. How do we find the ways they're doing that to allow people to start businesses sooner, and then hopefully those businesses continue to grow? So when I say emerging retail trends, it might be, you're actually looking now, people are shrinking their restaurant space saying eat outside. So it might be, the bays underneath the parking garage, that first floor bay. If I get it there, cool, right there. That's about 1,100 square feet. It's not huge, but the idea is go outside, use the park. Do we use a delivery service? Do we actually have we've been discussing at the market hall possibly having a food valet that would deliver it to your residential unit in the development. So how do we find other ways for these people to make money? You know, all of our apartments now are going to, with the contactless delivery, we actually have hot and cold storage that are going in our new developments because people don't, you know, they want their groceries delivered, they want something else, but they don't necessarily want that contact. So how do we find a way to create that new space? The only large format restaurant you see is the one out front. And that, if it's a single story, is about 4,900 square feet. If it's a 2 stories, about 10. We don't know who that is, but that's the only large format restaurant you're going to see here. The rest of it, we don't necessarily want the guy that's going to be there for 20 years because we want it to be fresh. We want the neighborhood always to be having something new. And if these restaurants are successful, they're coming down here and moving into the business district into another location. So the idea is, how do we create that incubator space?
So when you mention retail, we're not talking about clothes and books.
No,
We're talking
sir.
about restaurants. So these
The
are
only retail, traditional sense that you might see, I don't even know if I'd call it really traditional, is we have a small pet supplier that does dog foods, things like that, that's been talking to us about a space. But again, they're looking and saying, you know, you have all these pets that are going to be in the development, a dog park across the street, that makes sense. But again, it's not a large space. And then the other one was US Playing Card has talked to us about possibly putting some type of small gift store here. But again, that's related to the development and nothing else. We're not talking large-scale retail, Gap, so no, nothing like that. This is going to be a very experience-driven retail. So as far as the highway land goes, we know, we've said this from day one, that that land has to be dedicated to creating jobs and other revenue for Norwood. This deal does not make sense for the city to do if you're not making some other type of revenue. We get that. So what you'll notice, we actually made it a little more flexible. We've had some interesting users contact us recently that, you know, so maybe I want the first floor, I want this floor. How do we look at that a different way? Ultimately, our goal is to drive home, you know, 200,000 square feet of some type of revenue-producing space for the city, whether it's the hotel or the office. I would be lying to you if I told you I knew who it was right now. I just don't, because it is. We had a great user lined up before COVID hit, and it just, they're not there anymore. So I think we're all feeling our way through this, but what I can promise you all is we will not be putting a space in there that's not helping the city somehow. We know that 7.5 acres, that's almost a third of this development.
And then, just to touch base on your concept and principles, I think that one of the things, at least that I'll be looking for as we talk about the architecture and the materials, is this embracing of the history, and I like this point of people are yearning for real places, and I think that those two aspects should drive your architectural choices. I know that a lot of fear, at least I can express my fear, is that the new buildings are going to look very similar to the ones that you see at Oakley Station and some of the new construction along Madison Road. And I can tell you that, at least in talking to friends and family, the new construction along Madison Road, a lot of them are saying they're ugly. And I would agree with them on some point. And I think that when we come to this project, focusing on these principles of timeless architecture that spans time. It says that you are part of a place that's been there for part of a place, this real place of timeless architecture, using some of the elements in terms of the curved windows on those upper stories. That's a detail that might be able to be incorporated into some of your new buildings to sort of reflect the architecture that was there. The use of brick and stone and metal as compared to ephes and some of the, they look like shipping crates stacked on top of bricks, stacked on top of stucco. I don't think it's going to work, and it's not going to hold to your principle of real places and timeless elements. So that's what I'm going to be looking for when I start to see the architectural aspect of it. Are we looking at something that is really timeless, is really a place? One of the other things I'd like for you to sort of elaborate on is your phasing. You mentioned that you anticipate coming not necessarily for a final PUD on all of phase one, but possibly a final PUD for each individual building. Can you explain how that might work in your mind, or what we should anticipate in terms of once we approve the preliminary PUD, how do we get to our final PUD of phase 1?
So this will all be built in phase 1.
Okay.
Everything here will be built in phase 1. What we were meaning there is maybe the garage design takes another 6 months longer than we want it to, but ultimately, as long as it's delivered around the same time to us, that doesn't really matter.
Right.
So from our angle, it's more of a design issue. You're basically designing 7 different projects on this site right now. So we're running a design team that has to design 7 different projects. And to achieve that and do them all at the exact same time is not going to be very easy. Either one phase is going to fall behind, waiting on the other to catch up, or I'm not saying we have to do this right now. Our goal is not to, but it is very possible that maybe the market hall isn't done immediately when the other building is. I'm just throwing that one out there. I don't know what the answer is.
Right.
It's possible the parking garage, we know the parking garage is going to be there. We know it's going to be a parking garage, but if you guys need full schematics on that building before we can get a final, I don't want to hold up the rest of the development to do that. Even though we know it's coming, we know it's
Right.
there, it's the same architecture team that's doing it. And that's why I'm saying you'll know the materials, you'll know the trees, you'll know everything else there.
So what the way that you're picturing is maybe the townhomes, we might be having a final plan approval of just the townhome aspect of it. We might, so that it may be multiple final PUD hearings, but all of phase 1, which we are approving today as part of the preliminary.
Correct, so the only reason I'm saying that is, if you look exactly right on the townhomes, if we're not going to build the townhomes, we can dictate materials, we can do some of the other stuff, but I would fully anticipate that that builder comes in and gets the final approval that it goes through. I can't come in with their designs, because if I'm letting somebody else build that, it's not right. So, no, we are gonna hold them to materials and colors and everything else that we fully expect them to do. But I won't necessarily have that at the exact same time.
Really, it just means we're going to be seeing a lot of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
For many different folks, should things need to be parceled out.
And that's good in a way, because it does allow us to judge each individual building on its own and to view it how it relates back to the whole site, and to also your principles that you have expressed that you are using as guidelines and guideposts for.
I would not be surprised if we don't expand phase 1 much larger than it is right now.
And that would be a good thing.
The reason why I say that, and we're still getting the engineering studies, is it appears we may need to do the overbuild on the parking garage immediately. Because if we don't, the infrastructure for the elevator towers and things like that might be lost, and that could be a significant expense. So when I say that we might be bringing, just know that we actually may be bringing more online sooner than we think.
Right.
So.
Okay.
The only other question I had, Chris, was the public art approval process. I mean, as they discuss public art within this request, I mean, we are not in a position to approve public art of any type at this time within a process like this, correct?
Correct. I think that what they're dealing with in terms of the public art aspect of it is they have 3 elements. They have the 2 art installations that they would like to put on the elevator shaft,
Correct.
as well as the video board.
Yep.
And the question is, this will be a question for the building commissioners, how does he view those elements in light of the sign code? And it may be, again, something to look at. What does the sign code permit to allow for those elements as part of this PUD process? Because signage, I mean, we would probably want to see signage or some type of sign guidelines that you're using as well, but that's going to be an element that the building commissioner that we're going to have to be aware of and talk through. But I would believe that those 3 elements would probably be the last elements that you will add to those structures.
They will be the last elements, but they are absolutely a part of phase 1.
Right. Part of it.
They are, I would say that video board is so critical to activating the park.
Right.
I mean, if we weren't going to have a video board there,
But in terms of
yeah, we
pulling
have
the
to rethink what we're doing.
But in terms of pulling the permit to get the
Yeah.
video board installed, that's gonna be the last permit probably
Correct.
pulled
Yes,
for
sir.
the
Yeah.
construction of that project, as well as the art installations, if they do require a permit, will be the last ones that'll be pulled.
Correct.
And so that might be, something that comes 2 years, a year, year and a half from now. So, it
Yeah.
allows us to get time to sort of be aware that we need to address those 3 elements.
Well, city council's addressing those elements, but we don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Right.
I think it'll be, in a year's time, it'll be a done deal and not a problem, but I don't want you to feel like this board's giving, or this commission's giving you approval for something like that, when quite frankly, council's working on putting that in place anyways, I think.
Okay. And again, back to our comment, activating that park is so critical to the success of this development. If we knew we couldn't build that screen, I don't know if I want to go forward in architecture, honestly. I'm just telling you the truth,
Yeah.
because it is so, if you look at Fountain Square, you look at it, it's such an important part of what we're doing here to create that space. To be able to say we have this lawn that nobody, you know what I mean, like, what's the public coming to?
It's just a green space.
It's just a green space.
It's just
We
nothing.
just spent millions of dollars to develop something that doesn't work.
And I think what we're saying, we're probably speaking the same language,
Yeah.
but it's getting lost in translation. But with those 3 elements, we're the planning commission, and we're here just on your preliminary PUD approval.
Correct, yeah.
So as a concept, we're aware that those 3 elements are included. But when it comes down to the actual permitting process, that's through our sign codes. And I don't even know if the video board is part of the sign code. That's going to be something the building commissioner has to discuss. And so the question becomes, if the goal is to have those 3 elements be part of this project, we have to recognize that there is steps and processes that have to go forward and to follow to make those be a reality when it comes time to pull the permit.
Okay. Is that something we could know at final PD or write into the PD that is allowed in this area?
I think that, again, you're talking about different tracks, so with those 3 elements, you could start now to speak with the building commissioner. Hey, here are our 3 elements we'd like to include. What steps do we need to take to get these so that when I pull my permit a year and a half from now, it's going to be there? So that's one track that you can start now, and then hopefully it can sort of coincide with your final. So when you do the final on that building, we'll know, and you can comment. Hopefully the building commissioner can say, hey, I spoke with them and these are what's going to be necessary, so you planning commission can consider and recommend to council to approve those 3 elements as part of the final. Does that make sense? You kind of,
I follow what you're saying. We're not going to know until we do a final, which means we spend 7 figures on architecture fees to not know if we can build it. Do you follow where I'm coming from?
I do follow where you're coming from, but we're not in a position to give you that comfort level. As I said at our meeting,
Yeah.
you guys you bought the project, you started the project before you got any of the permits, so we're trying to work with you as best you can, so we know that you're going to finish it. It's just there's certain processes we have to follow to make sure that those 3 elements
Okay.
are incorporated, and I would encourage you to start it now.
Yeah, so just a creative thought. Could we get an ordinance passed by council that allows us to do something like that?
Council is working through public art, through the public art process right now. So it might be something that in a month is not even something as a discussion, so, or it might be in 2 months. It's not gonna be far down the road before we find that out. I think that, ultimately, I as the mayor am all for that. I think having the board up there and doing exactly what you're saying and having the part, that is a great thing for the city of Norwood, and me as the mayor, I will be pushing forward for that to happen,
Okay.
so.
Thank you.
But we appreciate that. Yeah, I guess we're just trying to figure out, well, you can't really pull permits until we have the final anyway. So,
Correct.
I mean, obviously, like,
So as we stand right now, we're on a preliminary PUD, so we could approve or we could recommend council approve the preliminary PUD, and those 3 elements are as part of your preliminary PUD. So council at least are aware of, hey, we got 3 elements coming down that you gotta consider.
Okay.
All we do is make recommendations.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
Is there any other questions or comments from the applicant? All right. Do I hear any motions with respect to the application for approval of the preliminary plan as submitted by Playing Card Partners?
Is this also to amend the existing PUD?
No, that portion is not apparently part of this particular hearing or application. Is that correct?
It was not.
Ms. Town?
Well, it's within their paperwork. It was not on the application, so I did not advertise it that way.
So we do have a couple of options with respect to that. We can have them apply, and that can be considered as part of the final. They can apply, and we can consider it at our next planning commission meeting in September. I think that will probably be the cleanest process, is to have a separate application to amend the PUD ordinance to allow for residential. I think based on our feedback, I think we'd be fairly comfortable recommending to council that they do it, but at this time we have not the formal process to do so.
I would say it's just gonna be a formality.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to, we can't pull the architecture trigger until we know that either. I just can't spend that money, so I hope you, I thought we had it on the application, that's why it's written in the first paragraph of the documents. And I'm trying to pull the application.
It's right here if you want to see it.
Yeah.
Well, it's all right, but how do we make it happen? How do we get it happen? How do we make it happen today?
If they want to amend their application and deal with any of the consequences of amending the application in terms of notice, and obviously the people were advertised that this was going forward, they had a complete application. If you would like to amend your application to include an amendment to the PUD ordinance to allow for apartments, we can consider it today. If you would like to wait and do a formal application and submit it in September,
I can go amend it right now and just write on there, is that what I'm allowed to do?
actually you can make an oral amendment to your application if you
Yes.
like.
So I would like to amend my application to allow me to modify the original PUD ordinance from, I believe it was February of 2014, to allow for residential, please.
Are you sure that's what you want to do? Okay, I understand. Okay.
All right, so based upon the amended application, we have before us the amended application is to approve the preliminary PUD proposal, as well as to amend the ordinance to permit apartment. And do you want to add townhomes, because there are 2 different types of residential uses?
So yes, we would need to add townhomes as well.
Okay.
I believe they defined it as residential, so that's my apologies there.
Oh, that's okay. Townhomes and apartments are 2 different types, so it's apartments and townhomes.
Correct, yes, sir.
To permit apartment and townhome residential uses in this PUD zone.
Carrie, can you add that onto the original application?
Or do I need to do it?
We're in new territory, John.
It's not the original, it's going to be amended, it was an oral amended application.
Okay.
So it will be amended onto
I
it.
make a motion that the PUD be approved along with any amendments that were stated today.
I'll second that.
Okay.
You will. Jeannie wanted to.
All right, is there any discussion based upon that? So just to be clear, what we're voting on is the PUD proposal that was submitted to us, as well as the amended application, which includes adding apartment and townhome residential uses in the PUD. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, Carrie, can you call the roll?
Chairman Brown,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
John Brown,
Yes?
John Murphy,
Yes.
Jeannie Sickinger.
Yes.
The motion passes. Now, what will happen is we're a recommending body, so we will be presenting the recommendation to council, and they will be scheduling a public hearing and a council meeting where they'll vote on an actual ordinance. The ordinance will do two things. One, it'll approve the preliminary plan that you've submitted, as well as amending the original ordinance, putting the PUD overlay on the property to permit your apartment and townhome resolutions. I would encourage you to work with the law department and your legal counsel just to make sure that everything is tidied up between now and then, because PUD is an administrative process, possible subject to 2506 administrative appeals. So you want to just make sure that everything's lined up so that you're not tied in with any of those aspects. But as of right now, we are going to make a recommendation to approve your PUD proposal, as well as to amend the ordinance to permit apartments and townhomes.
Mr. Chairman, if I might add for next edification, the next council meeting will be, the one that you're going to be targeting will be the 25th of this month. And anything to present to council must be to them the Wednesday before, so it can be put on the agenda by the clerk of
No,
council.
that's not true.
I'm sorry, sir. They'll get a letter, and council has to set a public hearing.
Set
So
the-
you won't be required to.
Okay, my apologies.
Package or paperwork until they set that public hearing.
But that public hearing will most likely be set at the 25th.
They'll set a public hearing at the 25th. They have a 30-day notice regulation.
Okay.
So they have to set the public hearing and then make their notices. And you'll need to have your paperwork to them.
The Wednesday before the meeting.
That's good to have it clarified.
The hearing isn't the 25th, it's set the 27th.
Correct. But you're more than welcome to attend council on the 25th, because they will have our letter, and then you can be able to, through their rules, address council if you so desire, to say, hey, this is coming, we would like you to set the hearing quickly. You can set it for 2 months. So yes, you can still engage with council at that time, but there's not going to be a formal approval process.
Thank you.
All right. Pardon?
Need a motion to recommend?
To make a recommendation about this subject,
Which packet?
the one that's before.
We already did.
That was just to amend
Oh, that was just to amend.
that's to amend the PUD.
Okay. Do I have any motion to,
My motion was to approve the PUD and also
The
to
amendment.
amend the existing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed it.
Okay, so we're good.
Yep. All right, moving on to communications and miscellaneous. We do have one communication, which is from Miss Ashley Creech. She presented the Planning Commission with an email. If she would permit me, is Miss Creech here? Unfortunately, Miss Creech is not here, but it is a paragraph. Basically, if I'm allowed, if I may, Ms. Creech, I'm going to summarize your email. It's talking about affordable housing. She had a very extensive supporting documentation with her email, but what she is interested in is expressing her concern and making the Planning Commission aware of the potential for unaffordable housing, and making sure that Norwood is affordable for all those who wish to move in and enjoy the city. Does anybody have any motion, comment, anything of that?
I would, if I could, I would second, that she sent me the same message, and she brings up some good points. Mostly that all of the apartments that are put in here, hopefully PLK will not make them high luxury, top dollar apartments, and that there will be places for empty nesters to move to within the city of Norwood, and for others to move into the city of Norwood and take advantage of such a great development without being totally priced out of it. And she makes a very good case for that. I mean, that's something we need to consider and keep in mind at all times as we move forward with this.
Yeah, she's talking about workforce housing, and I do agree. It would foster diversity, it would cultivate collaboration, it would help with inclusiveness in the community. If there's a way we can make all that work and somehow implement that, I think that'd be awesome.
And I would just add that affordable housing's a new issue, and it's actually one of those good problems to have, because it just means that your community is at such a desirable place that people are getting priced out. And we want to make Norwood available to anybody who wants to enjoy our quality of life and who wants to enjoy what we have here. And I will say that what we've done through our zoning and allowing for apartments in all of our commercial zones really will help, because the more units we are able to encourage to build high quality units, it should stabilize, if not keep the prices affordable. What we do have to be aware of, there are certain communities that have taken more aggressive steps to allocate certain percentage of units towards certain affordable guidelines. It would be a great problem to have if we have to start implementing that, just to make sure that we are inclusive and diverse. I don't know if we're there yet, but I think any time that we can start having a discussion is a good opportunity. So if I can have a motion to accept Ms. Creech's communication as if read.
I'd make a motion to receive and file the letter with the communication.
Motion.
Second by Mr. Murphy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to excuse John, who had to leave a little early?
I'll make the motion to excuse John Brown.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Murphy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make that motion
I'll
to
second
adjourn.
that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary.